Hi, I'm Dan Zitt. I'm the Senior Vice President of Content Production and an Executive Producer for Penguin Random House Audio. Today, I get to introduce you to a really fantastic stage and screen actor, but someone who's really making a name for herself in the audiobook field, Frankie Corzo. Frankie, welcome to Meet the Voice.
Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So, a question that I like to ask actors all the time, I have to start with, but when did you know you wanted to be an actor?
The moment where I was like, oh, this is a thing I could do forever was I was auditioning for the role of Becky in the Tom Sawyer production. I think it was seventh grade, maybe sixth grade. And I'd been performing for a while by then, but I remember in the audition, my director and theater teacher let out this giggle at something that I did that it was so effervescent and it made me feel so effervescent. And it gave me this sense of like, wow, you can really like spark joy. And I knew I loved movies and I knew I loved performing and I loved watching things and consuming things. But the idea that like I did something and look how simply delighted he is made me so delighted. And I was like, oh, I could do that forever. That sounds fun. That's a
I just want
thing.
to play, I want to play pretend forever.
Yeah, exactly. And, I was lucky because I grew up right outside Manhattan. And so I had access to knowing that it was a real thing. I'd never kind of questioned the possibility.
So, how did you get started in audiobook narration?
I had left acting altogether for a pretty long time. After college, moved to LA and I really didn't like it. Um, I, so I was just like, oh, if I'm not going to be there, what am I going to do? I don't know. And I got into the fitness industry, and my now husband was actually living in Maine at the time. He went to St. Peter's Prep, and he was my childhood boyfriend. So we had just gotten back together, and he was living in Maine, and I was like, oh man, this is probably not going to work. So I wound up moving to Maine. I worked in fitness for forever, and when we moved back to California, Kyla-Garcia and I grew up together. Kyla is another incredible
Another great
narrator.
audiobook narrator.
Incredible narrator, has always been incredible. I've known her since I was like 12 years old. And everywhere we went, she'd introduce me as her friend, the actor. And I was like, actually, I'm a personal trainer, so sorry about her confusion. Um, and she'd been narrating for a really long time by then. This was like 4 years ago. And Dion Audio was having a class, and she insisted that I take it. And I was like, oh, okay, fine, whatever. And I took the class and I was like, oh, storytelling. This is what I went to college for. This is what I do. This is my DNA. And I happened to get my first book like a month later, I think. Deb Dion was super supportive, and Jorge Reyes, who's now Penguin, was put my name in for something, and I wound up with my first book. And I've never looked back. It led to me just saying yes to every acting opportunity that came my way. And yeah, now it's full time acting all day.
So, I was recently listening to your recording of Mexican Gothic, and the one thing that stood out to me when listening to it was like, it just sounded like you were enjoying that experience of telling that story so much. What is it about audiobooks that you like as opposed to, say, theater or television, or other
Yeah.
forms of media you work on?
I mean, I think audiobooks are so special, and it's truly without audiobooks, I don't think I would have ever gone back to acting at all, because audiobooks specifically reminded me how much I loved storytelling and filmmaking because of their nature, because of the fact that you are so immersed in the story. You are in that world. And I grew up with my like Teddy Ruxpin by my side, and I had an animatronic like Mickey Mouse that read stories to me. And books and stories were such a big part of what kind of gave me like stability and the ability to dream outside of West New York in my circumstances as a kid. Um, that when I got in the booth for the first time, it's not something you really get to experience on film or in stage, or where you are that fully immersed for the whole time in the story. Film, you're on set and you shoot for 5 minutes and then you're switching angles and everything is then pieced together. In an audiobook, it's hard to not get lost in it. It's hard to not be so present when you're working with something as like Mexican Gothic is so deliciously like visual and the world is so rich, and it's hard to not get fully immersed in that reality.
So, are there any characters that you've portrayed that really kind of made you think about yourself and reflect on where you come from or where you've been
Yeah.
and just like you've internalized in a way?
I mean, I've been really lucky. I've done a bunch of books during quarantine. And it's usually surprisingly the YA and like middle grade books that really, especially right now, there's so much beautiful work being done that just did not exist when I was a kid. Um, and I had one book in particular that was a Penguin book, actually, was PAOLA Santiago and the River of Tears. Um, and we just didn't have, I didn't have Latinx books growing up, really. I mean, I had Peter Pan in Spanish. Spanish was my first language, so I had all the Disneys in Spanish. But to see this like powerful, fierce little girl who doesn't apologize for what she is and what she believes and what she cares about, and is really able to admit her flaws and comes to terms with so many things and takes herself on this adventure, was a gift to the 13-year-old, 12-year-old in me. Um, Especially when little Latina girls weren't really portrayed like that, at all, if they were portrayed at all when I was growing up. And her family just reminded me so much. Her mother did so many things that as I was reading it, I was literally texting my mother when I was prepping it. And I was like, this book and my 12-year-old frustrations with you are all over this. And by the end, she's reconciled so much, and I'm so excited for the rest of the next one. And Tehlor Mejia just does such a beautiful job with those books. And it's just those middle grade characters that I get to read, those YA characters, that these fierce girls or gender non-binary characters that didn't exist being able to really use their voices, and it makes me really excited.
So the last question I'll ask you, is there a book or just a dream role you have in the audiobook industry that you'd love to take on at some point?
This is such a hard question. I mean, books were genuinely my best friends growing up. Like, I would disappear to go to the library at school and just hide reading books. I was always surrounded by books. But I have to say, I feel like I've been so lucky in the diversity of what I've been able to do as an audiobook narrator, that I think you asked me about audiobooks versus TV and film or in theater. And I think that's the other thing, is that, I mean, this year alone, I've done things from a nonfiction about Stephen Miller to a nonfiction about a serial killer to PAOLA Santiago and the River of Tears and Mexican Gothic, and like, it runs the gamut. And I feel so lucky that it almost feels selfish to wish for anything more. Like, I feel like I've gotten to tell so many incredible stories of all kinds that I really can't wish for anything more. I feel like a fool. I feel it's an embarrassment of riches to be able to work in this industry.
Okay, now, Frankie
All right.
Corzo, lightning round.
Okay.
Here it comes. What was the first book you narrated?
The first book I narrated was The Memory of Light by Francisco Stork.
What was the last book you narrated?
I am currently in the booth with The Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow by Laura Maitani.
Essential item for recording.
Water with electrolytes in it. Essential.
What's your in-booth uniform?
Lately has been boxers and a tank top because it's 106 degrees, but usually anything cozy, resembling pajamas.
What's your most embarrassing moment in the studio?
Just how loud stomachs are. I had no idea.
What was your favorite audiobook as a child?
I mean, I had so many books on audio, probably Peter Pan.
What's next on your TBR?
So next on my TBR is A Universe of Wishes, which is a collection of diverse short stories that I'll be recording this week.
Well, Frankie, I just want to thank you once again for being with us on Meet the Voice. It was really fun talking to you.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you guys for having me. I'm honored.